Flaster Greenberg presents New Jersey's Site Remediation Reform Act, a practical approach. This program was recorded November 18, 2009 at Flaster Greenberg's Conference Center in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. In this segment, Presumptive Remedies and Mandatory Timeframes, with Donna Urban of Flaster Greenberg and Kathy Stetzer, Principal Geologist with Rue Associates.
Hi everyone, I'm Donna Urban. I'm also a shareholder at Flaster Greenberg. Kathy and I are going to be presenting on how the Site Remediation Reform Act has basically affected two major things: choice of remediation and the timing of the remediation. Under the Site Remediation Reform Act, the DEP now has new authority to select the remedy that's going to be used for remediation of contaminated sites at certain sensitive populations. What this does is it basically takes away from the environmental consultant the discretion it had before to choose the remedy that it believed in its own professional judgment was best for that site. The sensitive populations that the DEP has outlined include residential development, schools, that includes public, private, charter schools, and also licensed child care facilities. And there's some talk that they may expand this list to include other facilities as well. The presumptive remedies that the DEP has outlined in its guidance are very directed measures. They're permanent in nature in most cases. They want to see unrestricted use, no restrictions in place in a lot of areas. Basically, you have to remove and treat the contamination. It's going to depend on the type of contamination you're dealing with, and also, if you're dealing with a discrete spill, they're going to want it cleaned up to an unrestricted use. There are certain restricted uses that will be allowed, and these are set forth in the table that's been published by the DEP, and it's on the DEP's website. And any alternative remedies must be pre-approved by the DEP. When can an alternative remedy be used? It's a real tough sell. That's going to be a heavy burden on the party conducting the remediation. You're going to need to demonstrate to the DEP that the implementation of an unrestricted use remedial action or a presumptive remedy is impractical due to conditions at the site. These considerations include structural considerations, but structural considerations, for instance, if it's just impractical, there's a building in place, you can't remove the building, that will be a consideration by the DEP. Also, you need to show that an alternative remedy will be equally protective as the presumptive remedy. There's also technical requirements. At this time, I'm going to turn it over for this to Kathy. Absolutely.
Great. Just a couple things regarding presumptive remedies in the sensitive populations and some remediation activities that are going to need to take place. The first, and probably not the most problematic, but one will be remediation of free product, and that includes soil and groundwater. Just last week, the DEP published numbers for petroleum for free product in soil, 8,000 for diesel fuel and number 2 fuel oil, and 17,000 for other petroleum constituents, so that has to be taken into consideration as well. In general, for these sensitive populations, they want free product completely removed. There may be some limited aspect where you can get a variance on that, but they're not sounding terribly flexible. For dissolve phase contamination in groundwater, I think there's going to be considerably more flexibility as long as you can show that it's not posing a vapor risk or a risk to other sensitive receptors. Historic fill, and also free product is one of the mandatory timeframes. So there will be some regulatory mandatory timeframes in the remediation of free product, which I think someone's speaking about a little later. Historic fill, the DEP finally gave us a little additional guidance in the ARCS rule, where they are going to allow site-wide historic fill that meets the definition to stay in place and be capped with certain limitations, but that should work pretty well. When there's localized historic fill, they are going to require some additional investigation and potentially remediation before continuing with your redevelopment. Backfill, I know that the Builders Association has worked diligently with the DEP to develop this guidance, and it should be coming out before the end of the year. And we're hopeful that there'll be some flexibility with the types of backfill that can be brought in to do these redevelopment projects. Contaminated soils, same deal, working with the acute soil standards that will be coming out shortly. If you can get the acute levels out, then you can continue to do your redevelopment. But there will be acute soil standards for PCBs, arsenic, lead, and pH, we know to begin with. So they will be particularly of concern when you're doing redevelopment. Vapor intrusion is obviously the biggest concern of the DEP right now. IECs for vapor are one of the mandatory timeframes. They are going to be looking for passive systems to be installed in all new construction for sensitive populations, and then with the ability to turn them active should the need arise. And the vapor guidance we were promised this week, so keep your eye out for the new vapor guidance that should be out soon.
Time will tell is a theme I guess you're going to hear throughout this presentation, because all of this is as it's unfolding, we're getting new information pretty much on a daily basis. The DEP had posted guidance, preliminary guidance for each presumptive remedy back in July. They also posted a draft guidance on when the DEP may undertake direct oversight or remediation on November 4th. And again, time's going to tell how what the new remedies will look like, and how they're going to affect the process of cleanup going forward as it goes through the regulatory process. Some of the issues and observations that we've seen, that we've observed, or that we've seen through comments to the presumptive remedies, is that there's a need for flexibility. It seems as though a lot of complaints have been that they're just too prescriptive, and it's very difficult to propose an alternate remedy that the DEP is going to find that is equally protective as the presumptive remedies. And again, it's going to be a heavy burden on the party conducting the remediation. Not enough choices available. There are other alternatives that are protective of public health and safety that should be considered. Basically, a party's going to have a little less latitude to develop cost-effective remedies. Again, the guidance is pending, so we'll have to wait and see. And with respect to timing, the statute establishes mandatory timeframes for each phase of the remediation, including the preliminary assessment, site investigation, remedial action. The clock starts ticking on these mandatory timeframes. There's also expedited site-specific timeframes that the DEP will put in place when it deems necessary. Criteria to look at is risks to the public health and safety or to the environment, and the compliance history of the person conducting the remediation. The interim rule, I list the timeframes there for the preliminary assessment, immediate environmental concerns, LNAPL, product recovery, and also receptor evaluations is a year. However, there are regulatory guidelines in place that include that you'll have to comply with along the way. The final rule, which is expected for May of 2012, will include those 1 through 4, and also these additional components I have here, including completion of the remedial investigation, interim remedial measures, control of ongoing sources of contamination, and completion of the remediation, and any other activities that the DEP deems necessary. These timelines apply upon enactment to all cases. This is key. If you do want to, or you're having trouble meeting a mandatory timeframe, which is going to happen, you have to make sure you get your extension request into the DEP no later than 60 days prior to the end date. Now, you have to also bear in mind that there are regulatory timeframes as well, that you'll have to comply with. And if you want to make that grace period an extension, you're going to have to make sure that you're complying along the way with the regulatory timeframes. There are times when the DEP is required to grant an extension, and it's basically when the DEP is delaying and doing something, such as issuing permits, delays in provisions of state funding, and approving long-term operation maintenance and monitoring of an engineering control. So if the DEP's holding you up, they're required to grant an extension. DEP has discretion, however, in cases where there's delay in obtaining access to property, circumstances beyond control. As example, they list fire, flood, riot, or strike. and other site-specific circumstances. And also, if it's something like a delay in gaining access, you need to show that you've been putting forth a good faith effort to obtain access. You can't just wait till the end and say, I can't get access, I need an extension. That's not going to cut it. One of the more promising things, at least for a lot of our clients, is that the DEP seems to be considering ongoing litigation. The litigation outcome has to affect the ability to meet a mandatory deadline, however, and also other financial issues, which it leaves a glimmer of hope for people who are having financial issues or they're waiting for funding or insurance money or contribution. So they are going to take into consideration those factors, especially for a small business owner. DEP is going to consider all these factors: compliance with the regulatory timeframes, again, which is key, potential risk to the public health, safety, and the environment, the results of your receptor evaluation, ongoing industrial commercial operations at the site, basically the complexity of the contamination. Here's the big penalty. If you miss a mandatory time frame, you're under DEP's direct oversight. You don't want that to happen. So you definitely want to make sure that you're doing what you can to meet the deadlines, and if you do need an extension, you follow all the protocols that are listed in the regs to get that. Kathy, you might want to jump on the issue of if you miss an IEC deadline or
right.
on Apple.
I think the DEP is realizing that there's the potential for IEC mandatory timeframes to be even accidentally missed because people don't really know what they are. They don't want you to stay in the system forever, so they are developing an off-ramp. If you get put into direct oversight for an IEC or for LNAPL, you're only going to be in direct oversight until you mitigate that particular aspect. Then you get to come back out, which was new and refreshing.
Thanks. I just listed some penalties that were in the regulations. You know, they're pretty steep: $8,000, $20,000. The practical effect is, what happens to responsible parties who can't pay. I've covered that. If you can show a good faith effort that you're trying to meet these deadlines and you apply for extensions when need be, I think the DEP is going to work with you. As Pat said earlier, there's no plan B. So I think that the key is to have open communication with the DEP, let them realize that you're doing what you can do to make the deadlines, and hopefully then there won't be as stringent penalties assessed and DEP oversight.
We hope you enjoyed this program brought to you by Flaster Greenberg. For more information, call 856-661-1900 or visit flastergreenberg.com. This program was produced by Professional Podcasts in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, on the web at professionalpodcasts.com. For Flaster Greenberg, this is Steve Lubetkin. Thank you for joining us, and take good care.